There are moments in your life that arrive disguised as something ordinary. They wear the camouflage of a Tuesday night, the familiar quiet of a shared room, the low hum of a city settling into sleep. You don't recognize them as thresholds until you've already stepped across, until the door has clicked shut behind you, and the architecture of your entire world has been irrevocably altered. For me, that moment smelled like old books and the lavender laundry detergent Liam always used, and it sounded like the frantic, silent beat of my own heart. He was a solid line of warmth against my side, his shoulder pressed into mine on the worn leather of my couch, and the space between us had become so charged, so dense with unspoken things, that it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. We had been sitting like that for what felt like an eternity, the movie on the screen long forgotten, its blue light washing over his face in silent, shifting patterns. He hadn't spoken. He had simply shifted closer, degree by imperceptible degree, until the last sliver of empty space between us collapsed. And then, his voice, when it finally came, was so quiet it was almost a part of the silence. "Leo," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the flickering screen, but I knew he wasn't seeing it. "Do you ever think about it?" My own breath hitched. It was a question suspended in the ether, a fragile, glass-blown thing that could mean everything or nothing at all. I knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating, what he meant. I had been thinking about it, about us, for 7 years. But to him, I had only ever been a fixed point, a constant in the chaotic orbit of his life. The safe harbor, the brother he never had, the friend. The question hung there, a key turning in a lock I had long since convinced myself was rusted shut. To understand the weight of that question, the sheer seismic shift it represented, you have to understand the foundation on which our world was built. Liam and I were a study in contrasts, a friendship that should have been improbable. We met in our first year of university, thrown together by the arbitrary lottery of dormitory assignments and a shared, desperate need for a decent cup of coffee. He was the sun, and I was the planet caught in its gravitational pull. He moved through the world with an effortless confidence, a kinetic energy that drew people to him like moths. He was a star on the university's rowing team, his body a testament to discipline and power, his laughter a loud, uninhibited thing that could fill any room. He collected friends, experiences, and stories with an easy grace, his life a vibrant, sprawling mural painted in bright, bold colors. I, on the other hand, existed in the quieter shades of the spectrum. I was a photographer, more comfortable behind a lens than in the middle of a crowd. I found my language in light and shadow, in the composition of a frame, in the fleeting expressions that most people missed. While Liam was out conquering the world, I was trying to capture it, to understand it one carefully observed detail at a time. I was patient, I was watchful, and from the very beginning, I was completely, hopelessly in love with him. It was a quiet, internal ache, a secret I guarded more fiercely than any other. It was a room inside myself I never allowed anyone to enter, least of all him. To him, I was just Leo. Steady, reliable, the person he called when his car broke down, when he needed to vent about a professor, or when he just wanted to sit in comfortable silence and escape the noise of his own life. Our friendship was a structure we built together, brick by careful brick. It was forged in late-night study sessions fueled by cheap pizza, in long drives with the windows down and the music too loud, in the shared vulnerability of being young and uncertain and miles from home. He would burst into my room, fresh from practice, smelling of river water and exertion, and collapse onto my bed, narrating the day's triumphs and frustrations. I would listen, offering quiet commentary, my camera often resting in my lap, resisting the constant, overwhelming urge to document the way the afternoon light caught the gold in his hair or the earnest exhaustion in his eyes. To do so would have felt like a confession, a betrayal of the silent pact of our platonic bond. My love for him was a subtext written in invisible ink, a ghost haunting the edges of every interaction. He never seemed to notice. Or if he did, he gave no sign. He dated, of course, a string of bright, beautiful girls who seemed to fit so perfectly into the vibrant tapestry of his life. I learned their names, listened to stories about them, and even offered advice with a carefully constructed neutrality that cost me more than he could ever know. I became an expert in emotional compartmentalization. There was the part of me that was Liam's best friend, a role I cherished and protected. And then there was the other part, the part that watched him fall in love with someone else and felt a quiet, physical pain, a hollowing out in my chest. I kept that part locked away, convinced that the safety of our friendship was worth the price of my own silence. It was a fragile piece, a carefully maintained ecosystem, and I was terrified of doing anything that might disrupt it. The friendship was the most important structure in my life. To risk its collapse for a feeling he likely didn't share felt like a form of madness. So I stayed quiet, and the years passed. The shift, when it came, was not a sudden earthquake, but a slow, tectonic grinding. It began with an ending. Liam had been dating Sarah for 3 years, the longest and most serious relationship of his life. She was lovely, smart, and kind, and everyone, including me, assumed they were on a trajectory that ended in a white picket fence. I had prepared myself for it, built up the necessary scar tissue around my heart to withstand the inevitable announcement of their engagement. But it never came. Instead, one rainy Thursday in October, my phone rang. It was Liam, his voice thick and unfamiliar. "She's gone," he said, and the words were stark, stripped of his usual warmth. "She packed her things. She said we want different things." I didn't ask what those things were. It didn't matter. All that mattered was the raw, splintered sound of his pain. I told him to stay put, that I was coming over. I drove through the storm-slicked streets to the apartment he had shared with her, my own heart a confused and guilty drumbeat in my chest. A part of me, the selfish, hidden part, felt a flare of something that resembled hope, and I hated myself for it. But the larger part, the part that was his friend, simply ached for him. I found him sitting on the floor of his half-empty living room, surrounded by the ghosts of a shared life. There were pale rectangles on the walls where her pictures used to hang, empty spaces on the bookshelves, a profound and sudden silence where her presence used to be. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, his usual confidence stripped away, leaving something raw and vulnerable in its place. He didn't cry, not then. He just sat there, staring at a space on the floor, as if he could still see the rug she had taken. I didn't say much. There was nothing to say. I just sat on the floor with him, a silent sentinel in the wreckage of his life, and waited. That night, he came back to my apartment. He said he couldn't stand the quiet, the emptiness. He brought a single duffel bag, as if he were just visiting for the weekend, but we both knew it was more than that. I set him up on the couch, with my best blanket and a pillow, and told him to stay as long as he needed. And so, the ritual began. At first, it was just the couch. He would come home from his consulting job, his shoulders slumped with a weariness that went deeper than his long hours. He'd shed his suit jacket and tie, and we would exist in a shared, quiet space. Sometimes we'd order takeout and watch a mindless action movie. Other times, we'd just sit in silence. The only sounds the turning of pages from my book and the rhythmic tapping of his fingers on his laptop. He was a ghost in my home, a restless energy that couldn't settle. The nights were the worst for him. I would hear him from my bedroom. The sigh of the couch cushions as he shifted, the soft click of his phone screen lighting up the darkness. He wasn't sleeping. He was haunted. I tried to give him space, to be a presence without being an intrusion. My apartment, which had always been my sanctuary, a space calibrated perfectly to my own solitary rhythms, began to reshape itself around him. His shoes were by the door next to mine. His toothbrush was in a cup on my bathroom counter. His scent, that clean, lavender and something else scent that was uniquely his, clung to the cushions of my couch, a constant, subtle reminder of his proximity. I found myself becoming hyper-aware of the physical reality of him. The sound of his breathing from the other room was a new kind of white noise. The warmth that radiated from his body when he walked past me in the narrow hallway was a tangible force. It was both a comfort and a slow, exquisite form of torture. After about a week of this, the first major shift occurred. I was woken in the middle of the night by a sound from the living room. It was a low, choked noise, the sound of someone trying to swallow a sob. I lay in my bed, my heart pounding, every instinct telling me to go to him. But I was frozen by a familiar fear. What were the rules now? What was the boundary between friend and something else? To comfort him felt necessary, but it also felt dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice. Finally, the sound came again, more broken this time. and the friend in me won out over the coward. I pushed back my covers and walked into the living room. He was sitting up on the couch, his head in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking. The moonlight filtering through the window cast him in a pale, ethereal glow. He looked utterly lost. "Liam," I whispered, and my voice sounded loud in the stillness. He looked up, and his eyes were glistening. He didn't try to hide it. "I'm sorry," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to wake you. It's so quiet. And big. The world feels too big right now." I understood what he meant. He was talking about the loneliness, the vast, empty space that a person leaves behind. I crossed the room and sat on the edge of the coffee table in front of him. I didn't touch him. I just sat there, a silent anchor in his storm. "It's okay," I said softly. "It's supposed to." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said something that changed the geography of our arrangement. This is going to sound stupid, but can I just come in your room? I don't need to be in the bed. I could just sleep on the floor. It's just, I can't be alone out here anymore." My mind raced. It was a request born of grief and desperation. I knew that. It was not a proposition. It was a plea for proximity, for the simple, primal comfort of not being alone in the dark. To say no would have been cruel. To say yes felt like opening a door I had promised myself I would always keep locked. "You're not sleeping on the floor," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My bed's big enough. Come on." He hesitated for only a second before he stood up, a silent, grateful shadow. He followed me back into my room. I got into my side of the bed, the side by the wall, and he slid in on the other, leaving a careful, deliberate foot of space between us. We lay there in the darkness, side by side, two separate islands in the same sea of mattress. The silence was different now. It was heavier, filled with the sound of our breathing, the rustle of the sheets, the palpable awareness of another human being just inches away. I lay perfectly still, my muscles tensed, every nerve ending firing. I was acutely aware of the heat his body was generating, a warmth that reached across the divide between us. It was the most chaste, and yet the most profoundly intimate, experience of my life. He fell asleep before I did. His breathing deepened, evening out into a slow, steady rhythm. Eventually, in his sleep, he rolled onto his side, facing away from me. The distance between us remained, a testament to the unspoken rules we were both trying to navigate. I stayed awake for hours, listening to him breathe, my heart a wild, frantic bird trapped in my ribs. This was dangerous territory. This was a new level of intimacy, born of his pain and my inability to deny him comfort. And I knew, even then, that it was a boundary we would not be able to uncross. That night established the new normal. The couch was abandoned. Every night, Liam would retreat to my room with me. We never spoke of it in the daylight. In the morning, we'd move around each other in the kitchen, making coffee, talking about work, acting as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The night was our secret, a shared space where the rules of our friendship were suspended. The ritual became ingrained. He would shower first, and the steam would curl out from under the bathroom door, carrying the scent of my soap, my shampoo, on his skin. He would emerge, towel slung low on his hips, and move through the semi-darkness of my room with a growing familiarity. He'd pull on a pair of sweats and a t-shirt, and then slide into his side of the bed. I began to catalog the details with the obsessive eye of a photographer. The way his hair, still damp from the shower, curled at his nape. The specific cadence of his breathing as he drifted off to sleep. The weight of his presence in the bed, the subtle dip in the mattress that announced his existence. I learned that he sometimes mumbled in his sleep, fragments of conversations about software code and project deadlines. I learned that he always kicked off the covers, his body a furnace that radiated heat. I existed in a state of heightened sensory awareness, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety and longing. The space between us and the bed began to shrink. It wasn't a conscious decision on either of our parts, I don't think. It was a slow, gravitational pull. An accidental brush of his hand against my back as he shifted. A night when I woke up to find his foot resting against my calf. Each tiny point of contact was a spark that shot through my system, leaving me breathless. I would lie awake, feigning sleep, my mind a chaotic swirl of what-ifs. Was this just the unconscious movement of a sleeping body? Or was it something more? Was he, on some subconscious level, seeking the same connection that I was. I analyzed every gesture, every sigh, every rustle of the sheets, searching for a clue, a sign that I was not alone in this strange, uncharted territory. He started talking more at night, in the quiet moments before sleep. The darkness seemed to grant him a permission he didn't have in the light of day. He talked about Sarah, not with anger, but with a kind of bewildered sadness. He talked about his job, the pressure, the feeling that he was on a path he hadn't consciously chosen. He talked about his family, his fears, his dreams. I became the keeper of his whispered confessions, the silent witness to his vulnerability. And in those moments, my love for him deepened, transforming from a youthful infatuation into something more profound, more tender. I was falling in love not just with the sun-drenched, confident man the world saw, but with the uncertain, fragile man who existed only in the quiet darkness of my room. One night, about a month into this new arrangement, I woke up with a start. Something was different. It took me a moment to realize what it was. An arm was slung across my waist. It was heavy, warm, and unmistakably Liam's. My entire body went rigid. He had rolled over in his sleep and thrown his arm over me, his hand resting loosely on my hip. His front was pressed against my back, his knees tucked into the back of mine. His slow, even breath was warm against my neck. He was, for all intents and purposes, cuddling me. My mind went into overdrive. I told myself to stay calm, that it was an accident, a meaningless, unconscious act. But my body betrayed me. A wave of warmth spread through my chest, a feeling of rightness so intense it was almost painful. This was the thing I had fantasized about for years, and here it was, happening under the guise of sleep. I lay there for what felt like hours, not daring to move, not even daring to breathe too deeply, for fear of waking him and shattering the illusion. I tried to commit every sensation to memory: the weight of his arm, the texture of his skin against my shirt, the faint, clean scent of him, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest against my back. It was a stolen moment of intimacy, and it was the most beautiful and agonizing thing I had ever experienced. When the first hints of dawn began to lighten the window, I knew I had to move. I couldn't let him wake up like this. The potential for awkwardness, for him to pull away in confusion or embarrassment, was too great. Very slowly, inch by agonizing inch, I began to slide out from under his arm. I held my breath, my movements as fluid and silent as I could make them. I managed to get free, slipping out of the bed and standing in the cool morning air, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked back at him. He was still asleep, his arm now resting on the empty space where I had been. He mumbled something and rolled onto his back. The moment was gone, as if it had never happened. But it had. It had happened to me, and it had left its mark. This became another part of the ritual. It didn't happen every night, but it happened often enough that it became a pattern. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find him holding me. Sometimes his arm would be across my chest, his hand resting over my heart. Sometimes he would be the little spoon, his back pressed against mine, and I would wake to find my own arm draped over him. Each time, I would lie there, soaking in the forbidden comfort, my mind a battlefield of hope and fear. And each time, before dawn, I would carefully extricate myself, preserving the plausible deniability of his unconscious actions. We were two people sharing a bed, but we were living in two different realities. In his, we were just friends seeking comfort. In mine, we were orbiting something far more complex, something with the power to heal me or to break me completely. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. Was I projecting my own desires onto his innocent actions? Was I building a grand narrative out of a series of meaningless coincidences? The photographer in me, the observer, tried to be objective. I cataloged the evidence: the shrinking space in the bed, the whispered confessions in the dark, the nighttime cuddling. But the evidence was all circumstantial, open to interpretation. There was always another explanation. He was grieving. He was lonely. He was a tactile sleeper. I was his safe space, and he was using me as a human teddy bear. To assume it was more than that felt arrogant, foolish. And yet, the feeling persisted. A low, constant hum of possibility that vibrated just beneath the surface of our every interaction. The tension was becoming unbearable. I felt like I was living a double life. By day, I was the supportive friend, calm and steady. By night, I was a mess of longing and anxiety, lying next to the one person I wanted most in the world, unable to say or do anything. The silence was a living thing between us, growing heavier each night. I knew something had to break. I just didn't know if it would be the silence, or if it would be me. I was walking a tightrope stretched over a canyon, and the fall looked deep and final. Then came the Tuesday night that changed everything. It had been a particularly hard day for him. A major project at work had gone sideways, and he had come home late, looking utterly defeated. He skipped dinner, showered in silence, and got into bed without a word. I followed a few minutes later, the anxiety in the room so thick I could taste it. We lay on our respective sides, the space between us feeling like a chasm again. The silence stretched on, punctuated only by the distant wail of a siren. I was just about to give in to the exhaustion pulling at my eyelids when he rolled over to face me. In the dim light from the street lamp outside my window, I could just make out his silhouette, the dark shape of his eyes fixed on me. "I'm screwing everything up, Leo," he said, his voice a low rumble in the dark. "No, you're not," I replied, my own voice hushed. "You're having a bad week. It'll pass." "Will it?" he asked, and there was a genuine note of despair in his voice that twisted my gut. "Everything feels broken. The job, my life, me. I feel broken." I wanted to reach out, to pull him close and tell him he wasn't broken, that he was the strongest person I knew. But I kept my hands clenched at my sides. The boundary, though blurred, was still there. "You're not broken, Liam. You're just healing. It takes time." He was silent for a long time after that. I thought he might have fallen asleep. I watched the faint rise and fall of his shoulders, my own breathing unconsciously syncing with his. I was just letting my eyes drift shut when he spoke again, his voice even quieter than before. "I couldn't have gotten through this without you," he said. "Of course," I whispered. "That's what friends are for." The word friends hung in the air between us, feeling both true and profoundly dishonest. He shifted, moving closer. The heat of his body intensified. He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me. I could feel his gaze on my face, and my heart began to pound a frantic, chaotic rhythm against my ribs. This felt different. This was not the unconscious movement of sleep. This was deliberate. This was a choice. My entire being was screaming. I was a frame of film, overexposed and burning under the intensity of his focus. He didn't speak for a full minute. He just looked at me, and in the shadows, I saw an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was a mixture of vulnerability, uncertainty, and something else, something I couldn't name, but that made the air crackle around us. And then he moved, not towards me, but settling back down on his side, his body now aligned with mine, only inches away. He settled in, his shoulder pressing against mine. He was a solid line of warmth, a tangible presence that grounded me even as my mind was spinning out of control. We lay there, face to face in the near darkness. This was the most intentional, the most awake we had ever been in this bed together. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with a question. This was the moment. The culmination of weeks of shared grief, of blurred lines, of unspoken intimacy. This was the precipice. The air grew thick, heavy, charged with all the things we hadn't said. The movie on the television of my memory had been playing all along, leading us here, to this couch, to this silence. It wasn't a couch, of course, it was my bed, but the feeling was the same. The feeling of being on the edge of a cliff, with the wind at my back. He was so close I could feel the warmth of his breath on my cheek. He smelled of my soap, of sleep, and of something that was just him. And that's when he asked the question. "Leo," he murmured, his voice a thread of sound in the profound quiet. "Do you ever think about it?" My breath caught in my throat. The unspoken thing. The ghost that had haunted our friendship for 7 years. The possibility that lived in the space between our bodies in this bed. My mind reeled. This was it. The moment of truth. My silence was my answer, a confession in itself. I couldn't form words. I could only lie there, my heart a frantic drum, and wait for the world to either come together or fall apart. "About us," he clarified, his voice barely a whisper, as if saying the words aloud might shatter the fragile tension between us. A single word, a universe. My voice, when I finally found it, was hoarse. Every day, the admission was out. The secret I had guarded for so long was finally free, hanging in the small, sacred space between our faces. I saw his eyes widen slightly in the gloom. I saw the subtle parting of his lips. There was no shock on his face, no revulsion. There was only a quiet, profound stillness. A recognition. It was as if I had just spoken a word in a language he had always known, but had never heard spoken aloud. He didn't pull away. He moved closer, the last inch of space between us vanishing. "Would it be okay," he whispered, his breath ghosting across my lips, "if I kissed you?" The question was a gift. It was a gesture of respect for the friendship we had built, for the trust one had placed in him. He wasn't assuming. He wasn't taking. He was asking. He was giving me the choice, the power to define this moment. All the fear, all the anxiety I had been carrying for weeks, for years, seemed to dissolve in that single, considerate question. It was replaced by a wave of certainty so powerful it left me dizzy. "Yes," I breathed out, the word a release, a surrender. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a passionate, desperate kiss like in the movies. It was tentative. It was questioning. It was unbelievably gentle. It was the soft press of his lips against mine, a moment of quiet discovery. It was a conversation without words, a confession answered in kind. In that single, hesitant touch, I felt the loneliness of the past 7 years begin to recede. The room I had kept locked inside myself for so long was finally filled with light. I brought my hand up, my fingers trembling slightly, and rested it on his cheek. His skin was warm, the stubble of his beard a rough, grounding texture under my palm. He deepened the kiss slightly, a soft sigh escaping his lips, and I felt him relax into it, the tension draining from his shoulders. It was a kiss that tasted of relief, of homecoming. It was the end of a long, lonely wait, and the beginning of something I hadn't let myself believe was possible. When we finally broke apart, we didn't move away from each other. Our foreheads rested together, our breath mingling in the small space between us. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was a comfortable, peaceful silence, filled not with questions, but with a shared, unspoken understanding. "Oh," he breathed, and the word was full of a soft, wondrous surprise. "So that's what that was." I let out a shaky laugh. What was this?" he murmured, his thumb stroking my cheekbone. "This feeling. I thought. I don't know what I thought. I thought I was just going crazy, that I was just lonely and leaning on you too much. But it's more. It's more." I agreed, my voice thick with emotion. He fell asleep like that, his head tucked into the crook of my neck, his arm thrown possessively over my chest. For the first time, I didn't lie awake, anxious and tense. I didn't extricate myself before dawn. I held him close, my hand resting on his back, feeling the steady, reassuring rhythm of his heart beating against my own. I fell into the deepest, most peaceful sleep I had known in years, anchored by his weight, his warmth, his presence. I had crossed the threshold, and the room on the other side was more beautiful than I had ever dared to imagine. The morning after was a study in soft focus and quiet intimacy. I woke to the feeling of sunlight on my face and the weight of Liam's arms still around me. He was still asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful in a way I hadn't seen since before his breakup. I lay there for a long time, just watching him, trying to reconcile the man sleeping in my arms with the friend I had known for so long. They were the same person, of course, but a new layer had been revealed, a new depth. The fear and anxiety of the previous weeks had been replaced by a fragile, tentative hope. I was terrified of breaking the spell, of saying or doing the wrong thing. So I did nothing. I just breathed with him, in the quiet light of a new day. When he finally stirred, his eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, they were unfocused. Then they found mine, and a slow, sleepy smile spread across his face. It was a genuine, unguarded smile, and it made my heart ache with a fierce, protective tenderness. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my own voice softer than usual. There was a beat of silence. The moment hung in the air, delicate and new. He didn't pull away. He didn't act embarrassed or awkward. He just looked at me, his gaze clear and direct. Then he leaned in and kissed me again, a soft, simple morning kiss that was more reassuring than any words could have been. It was a confirmation. Last night was not a dream. It was not a mistake born of grief and darkness. It was real. But the fragile peace of that morning was not built to last. The world outside my bedroom, with its expectations and its noise, was waiting. As we moved into the kitchen, the familiar choreography of our morning routine felt different. Awkward. We were both hyper-aware of each other, of the new, unspoken thing that existed between us. The comfortable ease was gone, replaced by a self-conscious hesitation. When our hands brushed as we both reached for the coffee mugs, we both flinched back as if burned. The silence, which had been so peaceful just an hour before, now felt charged with uncertainty. The withdrawal began subtly. Liam left for work earlier than usual, with a mumbled excuse about a morning meeting. He sent a text in the afternoon, a terse, functional message about working late. It was the kind of text he would have sent before, but now it felt different. It felt like distance. When he finally came home that night, the easy intimacy of the past weeks was gone. He didn't collapse onto the couch. He hovered in the doorway, his suit jacket still on, his briefcase still in his hand, looking like a stranger in my home. "Hey," he said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "Long day." "Yeah," I asked, keeping my tone light, casual. "Want me to order some food?" "No, I'm good," he said quickly. I'm gonna take a shower and crash. I'm exhausted." He disappeared into the bathroom, and the sound of the shower was a barrier between us. When he emerged, he didn't come into the living room. I heard the soft click of my bedroom door closing. He had gone to bed. Alone. My heart sank. I sat on the couch, the same couch where this had all begun, and felt a cold, creeping dread. I had misinterpreted everything. The kiss had been a mistake, a moment of weakness and confusion on his part. He was regretting it. He was pulling away. And I, in my foolishness, had let myself believe it was something real. The pain of it was sharp and sudden, worse than the years of quiet longing, because now I knew what I was losing. I gave him his space. I slept on the couch that night, the cushions still holding the faint scent of him. It was a lonely, restless night, filled with the ghosts of the past month. The silence from the bedroom was absolute, a wall I couldn't penetrate. The next day was more of the same. Awkward silence in the morning. A day filled with a profound lack of communication. He was building a wall between us, brick by careful, silent brick, and I was letting him. I was afraid that if I pushed, if I asked the questions that were screaming in my mind, the whole fragile structure of our friendship would come crashing down. This went on for 3 days. 3 days of living like polite, distant roommates. The tension in the apartment was suffocating. The air was thick with unspoken words, with regret and confusion. He was a storm cloud in my home, radiating a misery that was palpable. I was oscillating between anger and hurt. I was angry at him for being a coward, for not being able to face what had happened between us. And I was hurt, so deeply hurt, that the intimacy we had shared could be so easily discarded. I felt like I had been a convenience, a port in his storm, and now that the worst of his grief was passing, he was ready to set sail again, leaving me behind on the shore. On the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. The silence was more damaging than any argument could be. He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his laptop, though he hadn't typed a word in 20 minutes. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. "We need to talk," I said, and my voice was stronger than I expected. He flinched, his gaze finally lifting from the screen to meet mine. He looked tired. He looked lost. "Leo, No." I cut him off, taking a step into the room. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to kiss me, to sleep in my bed, to let me see a part of you that no one else sees, and then just disappear. You don't get to build a wall and pretend it never happened. It's not fair." He closed the laptop, the soft click echoing in the tense silence. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of profound frustration. "I know," he said, his voice low. "I know it's not. I'm sorry. I'm so confused." "Confused about what, Liam?" I pressed, my voice rising slightly. "Was it a mistake? Is that what this is? Because if it was, just tell me. Just be honest with me. I can take it. What I can't take is this silence. This pretending. It's killing me." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a raw, desperate conflict. "It wasn't a mistake," he said, and the words were quiet but firm. "That's the problem. It wasn't a mistake, and it's terrifying me." He stood up and began to pace the small kitchen, a caged animal. "All my life," he began, his voice strained, I've had a map. You go to school, you get a good job, you meet a nice girl, you get married. That's the path. That's the one I was on. With Sarah, it was comfortable. It was what was expected. And when it ended, my whole map was gone. I was lost. And you were my anchor. My one fixed point. He stopped pacing and faced me, his expression pleading. And then, somewhere along the way, the anchor became the destination. The lines got blurry. Lying in bed with you at night, it was the only time I felt safe. The only time the world stopped feeling so big and empty. And that night, when I kissed you, it felt more right than anything has in a very long time. And that's what scares me. Because it's not on the map, Leo. This isn't on any map I've ever seen. His confession washed over me, extinguishing the anger and leaving only a profound empathy. He wasn't pulling away from me. He was pulling away from a version of himself he no longer understood. He was afraid not of his feelings for me, but of what those feelings meant for his entire identity, for the life he had always imagined for himself. So you'd rather be miserable and lost with your old, useless map, I said, my voice gentle now, than be happy and scared on a new path. He stared at me, his conflict written plainly on his face. I don't know how, he whispered. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I admitted, and the honesty of it seemed to break the last of the tension between us. But we could figure it out. Together. If you wanted to. But I can't be your secret, Liam. I can't be your temporary comfort while you figure things out. You have to choose. You have to decide if you're willing to be brave enough to draw a new map. I laid it all out for him, my heart in my hands. The choice was his. I had survived loving him in secret for 7 years. I would survive this, too, whatever he decided. But I wouldn't live in this painful, ambiguous limbo any longer. I had to know. He closed the distance between us in 3 long strides. He stopped right in front of me, so close I could see the flecks of green in his brown eyes. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before he gently cupped my cheek. His touch was warm, firm, and deliberate. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. I'm scared, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I think I'm more scared of losing you. And with that, he leaned in and kissed me again. This kiss was different from the others. It wasn't tentative or questioning. It wasn't a discovery. It was a decision. It was a promise. It was the first word written on our new map. The aftermath of the conflict was not a sudden, dramatic explosion of romance. It was quieter, more profound than that. It was a slow, deliberate recalibration of our entire world. It was Liam, the next morning, taking my hand as we sat on the couch drinking coffee, his thumb tracing patterns on my skin. It was the way he looked at me now, a direct, open gaze that held none of the old confusion. It was the end of the nightly ritual of separate sides and unspoken rules. That night, when we went to bed, there was no chasm between us. He pulled me close, tucking my head under his chin, our limbs tangling together in a comfortable, easy embrace. There was no pretense of sleep, no plausible deniability. There was only a quiet, mutual understanding. This was our new normal. We began the slow, careful work of building a new kind of foundation, one based on honesty instead of secrets. We talked for hours, unspooling years of unspoken feelings and assumptions. I told him about the depth of my feelings for him, about the quiet ache I had carried for so long. He listened, his expression a mixture of awe and regret. He told me about the subtle, unconscious ways he had been drawn to me for years, a pull he had never allowed himself to examine too closely because it didn't fit his narrative. He confessed that my apartment had always felt more like home to him than his own, that my quiet presence was the only thing that could truly calm the restlessness inside him. We were 2 archaeologists, carefully excavating the ruins of our old friendship to find the beautiful, sturdy bones of something new underneath. The door to my bedroom, which had once been a symbol of a fragile, permeable boundary, became something else. Now, when we closed it at night, it was not to hide from the world, but to create our own. Our room became a sanctuary, a space where we could be completely, utterly ourselves. The world with its maps and expectations could wait outside. In here, we were just Leo and Liam, learning a new language together, a language of gentle touches, of quiet mornings, of shared, peaceful silence. The domestic intimacy we fell into was effortless. Making him breakfast, watching him shave in the morning, folding his laundry with mine. These small, ordinary acts became imbued with a new significance. They were the bricks of our new life, small, solid, and real. One Saturday afternoon, a few weeks later, I was in my darkroom, developing a roll of film. It was my sanctuary within a sanctuary, a place of quiet concentration. The door creaked open, letting in a sliver of light before closing again. I knew it was him. He moved through the darkness with a familiar confidence, his shape a darker shadow against the dim red glow of the safe light. He came to stand behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. We stood like that for a moment, watching as an image slowly began to emerge in the chemical bath. It was a photo I had taken of him a few days before, sitting on the windowsill in my living room, bathed in the morning light, a soft, genuine smile on his face. He looked peaceful. He looked happy. "You see me," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against my back. "I feel like for the first time, someone actually sees me." "I've always seen you," I replied, my voice quiet. I turned my head to kiss his cheek. "You just finally decided to see me back." We had been built on a foundation of friendship, a structure strong enough to withstand the storms of his grief and the earthquake of our shared revelations. We had navigated the confusing, terrifying space of a blurred boundary and had come out the other side, not into a fiery, passionate inferno, but into a quiet, sunlit room. The yearning and the anxiety that had characterized my love for him for so long had been replaced by a deep, abiding peace. The fear of ruining our friendship had been the biggest obstacle, but I realized now that what we had built was not a destruction of that friendship, but an evolution of it. It was the most beautiful, honest version of what we had always been to each other. We learned to heal in the beautiful, honest silence we had learned to create together. The quiet that had once been filled with unspoken tension was now filled with unspoken understanding. We didn't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. We had the quiet language of a shared glance across a room, the comfortable weight of his hand in mine, the steady rhythm of his breathing next to me in the dark. We had found our way off the old, worn-out map and were now navigating by a new constellation, one we had discovered together in the quiet intimacy of my small apartment. It was a love story that had been written in invisible ink for years, and we were finally learning how to read it. And it was more beautiful than anything I had ever dared to hope for.